Vinay for your kind introduction. Firstly, I take this opportunity to thank Bhosla Military School, BHME Society, and everybody for giving me an opportunity to be a moderator in this particular session. The occasion today is very important. Today we are at 150th birth anniversary of the founder president, Dr. B.S. Bunje, whose anniversary we are celebrating. Nitin Gokhale before me spoke about Dr. Munje, and I would not like to repeat anything, but I would like to add that the military training that was given to the Indians before independence, before 1947, ensured that we had a trained leadership available when India became independent in 1947. The 47-48 war went on for nearly 1 year, and those of you who have studied it would realize that first 6 months nothing happened simply because both sides commanders were Britishers. The Indian leadership of General Thimaiya, General Cariappa came nearly 6 months later, and that is when the whole procedure of carrying out offensive operations against Pakistan started. So this leadership carried us through the war of 1947-48, and Kashmir became a part of India. Afterwards, in 65 also, the same leadership was there, and not to mention the 1971 war, where Field Marshal led our armed forces to a brilliant victory, a lightning campaign. And again, all these people were battle hardened in the Second World War. So that was the contribution of participating. And Dr. Munje, Swatantraveer Savarkar, were few leaders who were ahead of their times and who said the Indians must join British military, because that time joining British military was not considered good because Britishers were enemies. But they said, no, today the Britishers catch you even if you carry one pistol, and if they're going to teach you about rifles and light machine guns and aircrafts and ships and all, this knowledge is going to be useful, because military knowledge, military experience takes a long time to gain. And how right he was proved by our victories in 47 war, 65 war, and of course 71 war. So that is so much for Dr. Munje and his foresight and the kind of thought leadership that he gave, and he established this great institution which has produced a large number of very eminent students in various branches of the Indian military. Now I'll come down to my topic. The topic today is Budget 2022 for Defense Ministry and Defense Industry. This budget was given on 1st of February, and I heard the budget completely because for nearly 13 years since my retirement, I'm listening to all the budgets very carefully, because the regional channel expect me to give some words of wisdom after the budget is over, especially with relation to the defense budget. So I heard it, and this was one of the shortest budget, 1 hour 30 minutes, and there was hardly any mention. On an average, I counted that in 13 budget that I heard, average time given to the defense budget varied between 1.30 minutes to 2 minutes. Maximum was 2.01 minutes, I think, in 2015, if you are statistically minded, that is. But this time it was even lesser than that. And it takes a fair amount of time later to find out as to what was allotted to the budget. You have to go to the site, you have to go to the defense ministry, wait for the release, etc. And when people come out, people don't even know what are they talking about, because no statistical data is available. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about defense budget, you must know what was the increase in the budget as compared to last year, what are the budgeted estimate, what are the revised estimate, how much has been allotted to the capital budget, how much has been allotted to the revenue budget, is the revenue budget sufficient, is the capital budget sufficient, how does it compare with respect to the national budget that we have. These are the questions that we need to ask if you look at it statistically. Of course, there is one aspect of statistics which I'm sure the speakers after me, especially Marshal Chopra, will talk about it. And the union budget as such, we have Dr. Ajit Ranade will talk about it. And then there are two other speakers who are there. One is Commander, Chartered Accountant and Advocate Mukesh Butani, who will talk about the legal aspect, who will talk about other aspects. Then you have Commander Suchit Jain, who is the innovator, entrepreneur, ex-program director for innovations in defense excellence. He will talk about those aspects, And last, of course, we have Dr. General Shakti, who will give his closing remarks on this whole issue. And before I introduce the speaker to you, today morning only I saw the news that based on the General Shekatkar Committee report, the Ministry of Defense has decided to do away with 9,000 posts of the MES. I repeat, 9,000 posts of MES. Of course, this was recommended by General Shekatkar nearly 2.5 years back, but nevertheless, it has been accepted now. So that was a very gladdening news that some efforts are on to reduce our revenue expenditure, which at times is unnecessary. And the second part, which was not very pleasing to my mind, was we have ordered the corporatization of the Ordnance Factory Board, because defense industry today is a part of it. And these people, the civilian employees, have gone to the Madras High Court saying nothing doing this. They have given some cock and bull story, if I use the unparliamentary word, to say as to why this corporatization should be stopped. I only hope that the judiciary, who at times has a habit of going for an overreach and poking their nose into subjects which should not concern them, follow a balanced path and give some balanced judgment. Let's hope for the best, purely from the point of view of our defense budget. So, defense budget is what we are going to talk about, and the order of speaking will be that we will speak for Dr. Ajit Ranade will speak first, and he's going to speak about the general aspects of the Indian budget and how defense budget forms a part of it. Then you have Marshal Chopra, who obviously will talk about the defense budget. Then third speaker will be Chartered Accountant and Advocate Mukesh Butani, who will speak on the other aspects. Then you have Commander Suchin Jain, if I pronounce the name correctly. He will speak about the innovations, the defense industries. Innovations has to be there. Unless you talk of innovations, things are not going to work. And I'll only contribute one thing here. Just 2 days back, Nitin Gokhale is here. He was interviewing the GOCMC of the Army Training Command on his channel. And there he mentioned, he said every year 130 to 140 officers of the army do M.Tech, and some of them are extremely bright. So now they're thinking they are being sent now to foreign universities to improve the technological quotient of the Indian Army. Then he talked about the academic relationship that must exist between the military and the academic world, because there are brilliant people in academic world. And before I could even complete my sentence, today I found the news. In fact, I got it on our Maratha Regimental Center net, that the Army Training Command has already signed a memorandum of understanding with Rashtriya Raksha University. I repeat the word, Rashtriya Raksha University. Today it is being commanded by one of the officers from regiment to which I belong, Maratha Regiment. Lieutenant General Mistry is commanding this regiment, commanding this Rashtriya Raksha University, which is expected to be a premier defense university. It is doing a good job, and I'm sure it will continue to do a better job in the days to come. So here we are. There's a lot of efforts are being done to not only improve the defense budget, but improve it qualitatively also. Now, what I will do now is I'll come down to the first speaker and introduce him, and then I'll request him to take over from me. Each of the speakers is requested to speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, 15 minutes being the upper time. And after the first speaker is finished, I'll thank the speaker and then introduce the next speaker, and the third speaker and the fourth speaker. And after all the speakers are finished, then we will have a session open for question and answers. We'll take few selected questions, and I have already requested the faculty of Bhosla to put those questions in the chat box, because otherwise, if you give an opportunity to speak, they at times steal the thunder from the speakers, which I would not like to happen, So let them put their questions in the chat box. So here and then of course, last General Shekatkar will give his closing remarks on the defense budget and many other aspects. Okay, so I will introduce the first speaker, that is Dr. Ajit Ranade. When I look at his biodata, what immensely pleases me is I think he belongs to the world of T20 cricket matches. In 20 overs, you must say whatever you want to say. His biodata is precisely 6 lines. I wonder how can a person ever give his biodata in 6 lines. But I think he must be believing in the theory that a speaker is best understood by the way he speaks. Now, nevertheless, whatever is given here, I'll read it out. Dr. Ajit Ranade is the Vice Chancellor of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Pune, which is a very renowned institution. His career has spanned both the academic world and the corporate world. I'm very happy about that, because even Commander Suchin Jain also belongs to a the services, also is in the academic world, etc. Then he was a group executive president and chief economist to Aditya Birla Group, an Indian multinational, which is there. He's also a founder member of Pune International Centre. It's a very active think tank which is based in Pune, and every month or after every 15 days, they have some very nice programs on issues related to national security. Dr. Ranade holds a B.Tech in electronic engineering from IIT Bombay, another top class institution of our country, and is also an alumni of IIM Ahmedabad. So double barrel. Two very important qualifications, and of course, he's received his PhD in economics from the Brown University. So an immensely qualified person to speak about the national budget and let's say the part of defense budget in it. But before he starts, I would like to tell you that the defense budget, the latest defense budget is today approximately 13% of the national budget. That is one thing I would like to tell you. And over last 5 years, the defense budget share has been decreasing as a part of national budget from 17% to 13%. And I think that's a very accurate way of finding out as to how much money you are getting, because comparing it with the GDP somehow doesn't give you accurate figure. So having given these opening remarks, I'll now request Dr. Ajit Ranade to start his topic, please. Over to you, Dr. Ajit Ranade.
Thank you very much, and good morning and namaskar. I hope my audio is okay.
Yeah, you are.
Rajan, thank you for a very kind introduction. And I'm honored and delighted and privileged to be here this morning on the occasion of the 150th anniversary for Dr. Munjay. Apart from the description that you read out, I would like to add one little tidbit. And I'm also an alumnus of Bosla Military School. But of course, it is the summer course. But as people who go to Harvard University, even if they do 1 month course, they call themselves alumnus. So I hope I can also call myself an alumnus of Bosla Military School. So wonderful to be here today. I'll speak for, and wonderful to see many friends here. Dr. General, Lieutenant General Shakti, whom I have had the privilege of sharing the dais on a couple of occasions, and Mr. Anil Chopra. And I must say, I also participate in you mentioned Pune International Centre. They, as you know, have an annual dialogue, the Pune Dialogues on National Security. That also I have been privileged to be part of. So I plan to speak for about 15 minutes, as you suggested. And since my primary hat that I wear as an economist, I will try to give some flavor about the budget, and then maybe make a few comments on the defense aspect of it. And then during the Q&A and discussion, I'm happy to come back with more intervention if necessary. So the budget is an important exercise because not even a single rupee can be spent by the government of India, or for that matter, government at the state level, without the consent of the citizen. So that is the sanctity of this budget process. So what we say the budget is actually a proposal. What the finance minister presents to the Lok Sabha is a proposal, and that proposal has to be approved. But because typically the party which is the ruling party, they usually have the numbers. So it is not as if the proposal is going to be rejected or modified. So usually when the finance minister presents the proposal, it is taken as the final budget. Rarely there are any changes, very minor changes, unless there is a huge backlash, which happened, let's say, in 1992, when the finance minister had proposed a 50 rupees increase in the price of fertilizer bags, and that had to be rolled back. So sometimes this rollback gets the finance minister is called rollback finance minister, but usually there is no rolling back. So the importance of the proposal is that this is taken as the budget. And the budget preparation are done over several months, if not several years. So increasingly, year after year, we find that there is not much, I would say, surprise or shock value or surprise value. And that is the way it should be, because the budget presentation is usually just a presentation of the expenditure and revenue that the government of India will do on various sectors. Now, as you mentioned, Mr. Mahajan, that if you look at what is the government's responsibility, it is, of course, to provide public goods. Apart from taking care of the poverty, anti-poverty is a big thing that governments do. But law and order and providing public goods like public infrastructure like airports, roads, and so on. And of course, the defense of the country. So defense is a public good, which is a primary responsibility, main responsibility of the government of India. Therefore, of course, there is a significance to seeing how much money has been allocated towards defense. And to that extent, that's why this discussion is relevant today. But before I go to defense, let me just tell you the highlights of the budget. So, we are coming after almost 2 years of pandemic. And because of the pandemic, that put a huge strain, extra expenditure for the government of India on pandemic-related, whether it was because of the lockdown, there was a huge stoppage of work, almost, I don't know, 30, 40, 50% of economy was closed, shut down. A lot of people lost livelihoods or jobs. So income crisis, but that income crisis was threatening to become a food crisis, food security. So the government of India has been running for almost 24 months a free food grain scheme, the biggest in the world, that under the National Food Security Act, which gives rice, wheat, or coarse cereal, pulses. So this has been running for 24 months now, and that expenditure, because it is free rations for the sake of the pandemic, the total expenditure on that has been 2.6 lakh crores so far. So please bear in mind that is a very important responsibility that the government has been discharging. So we are looking at this budget in the context of that we are going to be out of the pandemic soon. So that is why we should look at it that way, that now because of the remarkable fast vaccine rollout in India and of course in many parts of the world, and the optimism which is coming out because of the fiscal stimulus, the two largest economies in the world, China and USA, are going to be growing at 5 to 6%. They represent 40% of global GDP. So that is, they're 10 times bigger together. So if China, USA together grow at 5%, that is like India growing at 50% GDP growth rate. So that is the huge impact that will have on the world economy. And therefore, there is optimism. And the growth of the world economy also means a great export opportunity for India. So India's exports this year are actually going to be, this fiscal year are going to reach something like $400 billion, which is a 50% or sorry, 40% increase over last year. So that's one of the consequences of the world economy doing well. And next year also, I think exports will be a major driver of growth. So as far as the budget is concerned, the broad numbers are as follows. The context for the budget is that next year is expected to be a high growth year. There is some concern about inflation. The budget will continue to provide some fiscal support, but it will be lower. And the focus will be to stimulate growth at a faster pace, but also job creation, because that is the surest way of curing, anti-poverty policy is not to give subsidies or doles, but to create jobs, which in turn create incomes for households. So that has been the general theme of the budget. I won't go into each and every detail, but broadly speaking, the spending proposal has gone up by around 4%, 4.6%. So the size of the budget is, I don't know, something like 39 trillion rupees, 39 lakh crores, which is about a 4%, 4.5% increase next year. But all that, the good thing is almost the entire increase in the budget for next year is going to be spent on capital items. That is not revenue items, but items which are in the nature of investment, new capacities, new, infrastructure. So to that extent, it is the growth promoting expansion. And that is seen reflected, I think, even in the defense budget. As Mr. Mahajan said, that the defense budget is about 13%. So it's out of 39 trillion, 5.2 trillion, 5.3 trillion, roughly 5.25 lakh crores is going to defense. And that represents a 10% increase. The overall Government of India budget will expand by 4%, but defense is expanding 10%. So to some extent, so therefore we are seeing a reversal. I think there was a concern that defense as a percentage of government spending or defense as a percentage of India's GDP has been low, has been going down. But at least for next year, incrementally, there is some reversal. And there also, if you look at the capital spending, that is also going up. Capital spending of overall of defense, and that's a good thing because we want to look at the components of defense spending. We want it to be much more capital oriented. We want that to be much more oriented towards modernization. We want it to be much more oriented towards getting future ready. So that means we have to look at capital spending. So I think to that extent it's going up. I'm not going to go into the sub-components like Army, Navy, Air Force, because and so on. I think most of you are aware that actually the capital spending allocation that has been given to Army is actually a reduction. In fact, it's gone down. But that just means that Army and Navy and Air Force have got a huge increase in their capital allocation. So I'll leave it at that. The other aspect I'd like to say about in the context of the budget, defense budget, is that the continuing worry is that, as I said, we want the defense to get enough allocation in terms of resources for modernization, capital intensiveness, and future readiness. But what holds it down is the revenue spending. And that continues to be a big challenge. I was just seeing that last few years, the pension burden is almost, 1/4. 5.25 lakh crores and 1.25 lakh crores is pension. And you will be surprised to know that 5 years ago, the total pension bill for armed forces was 54,000 crores. And it reached, by 2020-21, it reached 1.3 lakh crores. So almost 2.5 times. So just in 5 years, 250% growth, 250% growth in pensions. This year, it's gone down a little bit from 1.3 lakh crores to 1.25. So I think that is a major area. I don't know if we'll have time to discuss that. And what is the solution for that? But there one must one must realize that there are certain myths that maybe the civilian defense is eating up, civilian pensions are eating up a large portion of the pension burden that is put on the defense budget. That is not true. It's only 20%. The civilians are paid 20%, so 80% of the pensions are going to armed forces personnel. And of course, I must admit that the tooth to tail ratio, that is the people who are in service, armed forces to civilians, that ratio can be smaller. Today it is, I think, 1 to 1.5, 1 to 1.15. So that means for every 100 armed forces personnel, there are 115 civilians. And to that extent, some rationalization, some reduction is possible. But the pension bill is not eaten up by civilians. 80% is going to armed forces, and that is something, it is being continuously reset. As I said, in 5 years, it went from 54,000 crores to 133,000 crores, 1.3 lakh crores. That's one concern. And that as the pension part of the budget keeps expanding faster, in 5 years, it expanded by 250%. I just said that next year's budget is 10% bigger. So typically in 5 years, defense budget will expand by 50%. But the pension part expanded by 250%. So that is going to crowd out. That will definitely crowd out the room left for capital spending. That is the room left for modernization. The room for cyber, the future warfare is, as you know, is future warfare readiness is not about the conventional means. It's cyber. And cyber means you need to invest a lot in cyber security. So that is one area of concern. The other prominent thing that I'd like to mention from this year's budget is the encouragement given to defense PSUs, domestic defense PSUs. And that is, I think, more than half a dozen. PSUs have been given funds to develop domestic capabilities, and also the partnership with private sector. So under the PLI scheme, the production linked incentives, as well as under partnership with government PPP model, that is private sector is coming in, and that's a good thing. I think we must also, I would recommend that we should not only look at becoming self-reliant and less dependent on imports as far as defense equipment is concerned, but also look at whether there are export markets. Now, this is a little, this is a sensitive area, but I'm just saying that I'm saying this because we should not develop domestic capabilities by raising import tariffs, by raising import barriers, because that is not the surest way of developing competitive edge in technology or in domestic capability. So, so long as we keep the barriers low, and so long as at least if we tap into export markets, that tests how good we are in the global field, global stage. So that's about it. I think. Overall, I think the budget was the relief for middle class was there were no new taxes. At least this is a non-defense angle, but there were no new taxes and no changes in taxes. As I said, the positive part is that all the extra spending is going towards capital spending, including in defense. And there were several other initiatives, modern initiatives like using drones in agriculture, much more focus on organic farming, or modern concepts like tax on cryptocurrency, then introduction of drone, as I said, the national policy for electronic vehicle battery swapping. So many such details are there, which are, I think, worth noting. Final comment is that because I'm an economist and I think I also look at what is the impact of development. I must say that the long-term security of the nation depends on how strong is your human capital. Of course, how strong is your army, navy, air force, and defense capability, but ultimately how strong is your economy, and economic strength comes from the strength of your human capital. That is the brain power, the muscle power, which is basically spending on education and health. And on that front, I must say that we are still, we have a backlog. We have to catch up with the world average. Our spending on health and education is still low, and this budget has not done anything to enhance that. Of course, one might say that that is a domain of state government, but be that as it may. One last comment, since last couple of years after, there's been a lot of discussion about India-China relations. So in that context, I'd like to mention that some of us wrote this book, which talks a lot about India's economic strength and economic policy. So this book I'm going to show on the screen, Mr. Majan, this is my last thing. This is called Rising to the China Challenge, and it has won an award in December. So I'm happy to say it came out a couple of months ago. There are 6 authors, but I would recommend if you can get your hands on the book. At least the first chapter describes some of the things I've said, and there's a lot of discussion on defense readiness. So I'll stop here and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Namaskar.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit Ranade. You have covered a lot of ground, and you have covered quite a few points which would have required a bit of discussion, but that is presently not in the agenda. However, I'll talk of only 2 things. One is you talked about the economy recovering. Yes, the moment economy recovers as a whole, then the defense budget also increases. So that itself is a good thing to happen. And last 2 years, we have definitely done well to ensure that the damage to the economy because of this biological war which China has launched against us is kept to minimum. So that was one comment. Secondly, you talked about the revenue budget. And in fact, reducing the revenue budget, which is an obvious thing. And no better person to talk about it than General Shakti. He has given, I think, 100 such recommendations as to what is to be done. But government is possibly not acting upon it. I don't know if the government can be convinced. And I'll only mention only one thing because that is a subject which General Shakti can talk about. Simple thing, an infantry soldier retires at the age of 35, 36. He lives till the age of about 75, 78. Nearly 40 years, 45 years he's taking a budget. So simple solution given by the Shakti committee was that you carry out a lateral induction into police, into Central Armed Police Forces, BSF. In fact, BSF, CISF, CRPF, Seema Suraksha Bal, ITBP will get a tremendously trained manpower, tremendously motivated manpower, and the human element that you're talking about will increase tenfold by just one step. You talked about the human element of the war. Yes, it's very, very important. Unfortunately, that is not happening, but I'm sure something is happening.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Majan, I'm really provoked to make 1 minute interruption. Sorry for that. But please don't think of these young people who are highly trained, highly disciplined as only people useful for security. I know Shakti committee has talked about it. These people will be excellent managers in the business world. Excellent. human resources, marketing, strategy, production. So these people you mentioned, this 35-year-old, 40-year-old retired, don't be only think of them as security guards and BASF and they're actually beyond security forces. They're excellent human capital of the country. Thank you.
No, what you're saying is right. Okay. Now we'll move on to the next speaker. That is, we have Air Marshal Anil Chopra, PVSM, AVSM, VM, and VSM. He's a qualified test pilot. He's a pioneer in Mirage 2000 fleet, who's commanded a Mirage squadron and an aircraft system testing establishment at the Indian Air Force. He's the leader of the MiG-21 upgrade Bison project, which went on in Russia for nearly 4 years. He commanded J&K ACAS inspection, and he retired as the AOC in charge of personnel. After retirement, he's been very active. Of course, he was a member of Armed Forces Tribunal, etc. But more important, what I look at his qualification now is that he's today heading the Air Force think tank called Air Force think tank, which is a very nice thing to happen because a lot of service personnel with an excellent academic background, excellent operational experience, just retire from life, and their vast knowledge which they have gained over a period of time is not utilized for the good of the country. So I'm happy to know that he not only runs a website on air power in Asia, but he's also a Director General of Center for Air Power Studies. A long time back, I've written a few articles for this think tank. So he's heading this think tank since February 21. So and not only that, when I was just put his name in Google search, Mr. Google told me that he's written an article on defense budget also. So I could read his article. So without any much further this thing, I'll request Air Marshal to start his talk. Over to you, Air Marshal Anil Chopra.
Thank you, Brigadier Mahajan. I hope I'm being heard.
Yeah,
my regards to the other seniors who are present here and the very renowned people, General Chikitker, sir, and Captain Naravane. And it was a great, we just heard Ajit Ranade, who's a specialist in his own ways, and he's given us the frame of facts and figures. So I think makes my things easier. Yes, I have in the last 2 weeks written articles, one each on Indian defense budget and one on the US defense budget, because that's important for us to know what the world is all about. So I will cover my little short talk in 3 parts. I will cover briefly the defense budget, which partly has been already covered. I will talk about how the others are spending and what are the inferences to the global world from the American defense budget. I must start saying that India is one of the very highly threatened countries, 2 nuclear neighbors. With both we have boundary disputes, and with both we have had wars, and the Western neighbor is also the epicenter of the global terror. So with this background in mind, we have to look at the defense budget accordingly. Yes, the figures have been given, nearly 10% increase from last year, which is not bad. It is 13.3% of the total. Yes, it has been going down to some extent, but that's okay. As a defense man, I can tell you it's not bad that there also. We are at 2.03% of India's GDP, but this includes the pensions. I must tell you that many countries, including the United States, they do not put the pensions budget or the veterans budget into the defense budget. But excluding the defense pensions is what is of interest to us, because that is what gets spent on the military. And that is around 4 lakh crores or $54 billion. And why I want to mention dollars, because when you compare with the Chinese or the American, the figure in dollars will be more relevant. Now, nearly 30 billion out of the 54 billion is going into the revenue that is for day-to-day running of the armed forces, including salaries, fuel, etc., and maintenance spares, etc. But the capital outlay, which is going to be directly affecting modernization, which is around 37% of the leftover budget, or 28% of the total budget. This is a figure which has been going up. It has gone up even this year by about 12.8%, which is good. And it is increasing much faster than the revenue. That is another very good thing. So the special fact about the capital budget is that this nearly 68% of the capital budget will be for acquisitions locally produced weapon systems. So it does give a boost to the indigenous defense production. Another feature is to promote local private defense industry. That means out of the total R&D budget that has been earmarked, which I'll talk separately, 25% of this will go to the academia, startups, and private industry for R&D purposes. So that is another good feature, I thought. Yes, pension budget is 15.9 billion or 1.19 lakh crores, which has been earmarked, which is high. It is also because of the pay commission, OROP, longevity, etc., etc. Many things have the reason for this. But when you say, we are not talking about how much the defense civilians get, but if you see the pension scales for equivalent ranks in the civil world, for IAS or for various other departments, they are not only comparable, they have figures for equivalent numbers of years of service is much higher. So therefore, this is a issue that needs a separate debate. And it's not what I'm going to speak about, but clearly the budget is Make in India. The major amounts are going to go, to the Tejas LCA for the Air Force, for example, like combat aircraft, the HTT trainer, the Arjun tank, many missiles and weapon systems that are going to be bought. And mind you, a large part of the budget also is going to go away into the committed liabilities. It means the orders have already been placed, the supplies are already on, and therefore to acquire absolutely new things which have not been contracted, the amount will be much, much smaller. Bulk of the revenue budget, of course, goes to Indian Army. It is nearly 5 times larger than the Air Force and Navy, and therefore it gets nearly 5 times that much of revenue budget. But because they get such a huge chunk of revenue budget, their total share in capital is less. Their share in capital is also less because the aircraft and some of the weapon systems that the Air Force and Navy have, they have shorter lives. Obsolescence sets in much earlier, and therefore you will find that the revenue budget, big chunk goes to Indian Army, but the capital budgets are much larger for the Air Force and Navy. We'll speak a little bit more on this. Border and infrastructure installation security has been given a big jump, 55.6% increase, out of which, out of the total budget of 8,050 crores of the border and installation, the border roads, the guys get 3,500 crores, which is a 40% increase. We are building bridges, tunnels, and roads along the border, so that is very important. Maritime security has also got about 45% increase this time, which is island infrastructure, Andamans, Coast Guards. Coast Guard has got another 60% increase. So, see the threat perception of the country, and that is how the allocations have been done. And as well as the ordnance factories, once they became DPSUs, now they have to be given some money to become modern organizations, self-sustaining subsequently. So they have also got a chunk of money, about 1,300 crores. 2,500 crores gone to emergency authorization fund, which is okay, which is normal, which is the way it should be. Innovations for defense excellence, IDEX. I think so. There is a speaker who is going to subsequently speak about it, gets 60 crores. And defense testing infrastructure scheme has been being set up. Some money has been given. Now this testing infrastructure and for certification, the private sector will be able to use, which is a very big thing. There is a special purpose vehicle which will encourage DRDO to hand over technologies to private players. Mind you, the process has already started in the last few years. So our key takeaway is vocal for local. Yes, that's the term some of the speakers spoke in the parliament. I think the defense minister mentioned. The capital budget of IF traditionally gets the highest capital budget. But this year, the Indian Navy has had a jump of 45% vis-a-vis their last year's capital budget. The Indian Air Force also got a jump, smaller jump, but though it still remains the highest budget remains with the Indian Air Force, but Army budget has sort of gone down. There are greater details on what goes into aircraft, aero engines, tanks, and various others. That all has been spelled out in the budget. I will not, I have the figures, but I don't want to mention them in so many details. Substantial increase for Indian Navy indicates focus towards Indian Ocean and for the acquisition of ships, aircraft carriers, and submarines. Of course, Army will get more money to spend mainly on their organic systems. They're hardly getting any money for aircraft, but they're getting for main battle tanks and the AK-203 rifles, etc. As I said, the IF's capital budget will substantially be committed to liabilities for LCA, Rafale, and S-400, which we have already purchased, and the deliveries are about to complete. Of course, for the LCA, we have to continue to pay for the rest of our lives. The duty rates Mr. Ranade mentioned has been realigned to make it better for Make in India. Our industry for long has been saying that our tariffs, whether they're customs, they were not friendly for Indian industry. So I think the government has listened to the CIA and others, and they made a difference on this. Okay. Of course, there are GST changes which have been brought in to support the local manufacture. The indigenously designed, built, and manufactured items are now the highest priority. That has been there for some years now. And increased defense production will also open up avenues for exports, and that exports are important for amortizing the cost. Now, it also will generate jobs and support targets of reaching our 5 trillion economy. And out of that 5 trillion, $25 billion US defense production by 2025. That's the target, and I hope that happens. The new policies would promote industry and armed forces interaction and coordination and confidence in domestically produced weapons. In the high technology areas, of course, as I said, the joint ventures will have been made more attractive. More FDI will be able to come in, and with this defense manufacturing corridors already in place, clearly the tone and tenor of the defense budget has been to make India a defense production hub. How it works, only time will tell. As I said, we need to have increased capital budget, but I will leave that part to General Shakti, who will speak at the end. Now, let me quickly cover up what is the defense budgets of the other countries. Now, there are two organizations which give us defense budgets of other countries: Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, and the military balance, which comes from the International Institute for Strategic Studies. But if you take their figures don't match with each other. They don't match with the budgets that each country announces, because every country takes, every organization takes the budgets in different forms. Now, in last year, US spent $778 billion, and China spent $252 billion, and India's expenditure total including pension is $72.9 billion. So it gives you an idea. China is having a budget of 3.5 times, India closer to 4 times, and America has 3 times bigger than China. So this is the kind of matrix. The United States military spending is 3.7% of GDP. China's is 1.7%, and India's, we already have spoken, is 2.1%. But there are others like Russia, which spends 4.3% of GDP, and Saudis spend 8.4% of GDP. That's the kind of idea to give you of the major countries. Most of us analysts have been suggesting that this too, we have a modernization gap. Indian Air Force is down from 42 to 31 squadrons, and similarly the others. Army badly needs some tanks and hoisters, and so does the Navy need. So we have been suggesting that we should go from 2.03% of GDP to around 2.5%. I know it's a big call. The country has to spend on education and health, but we have to find ways, because we have a backlog of modernization, and as I mentioned, that we are also the most threatened country. Very briefly, let me tell you about how the USA spends their budget. Now, US defense budget not only includes the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, but also Space Force. The proposals include the defense-related expenditure of Department of Energy. There are some nuclear programs which also comes into defense budget, though they are not outside their ministry. So, in a little more professional, the process is a little more professional. A team sits down. Finally, the president of America makes a defense budget request for the next fiscal years about 8 months before the due date. That means around April, May they start, because their budget has to be finalized by December. And it is looking at the capability building, and of course they're taking inputs from all the stakeholders, and thereafter it goes to the Senate. And mind you, this year the budget which was announced in December, the Senate increased the president's proposal by $25 billion. They said, no, you're asking for less because of the threats, whether they are in Indo-Pacific, whether it's in Ukraine, whether they have outside overseas contingency operations, whether it's NATO. So plus there is a requirement for them to modernize the nuclear arsenal, which is as old as in the 1960s. The missile defenses need modernization. So, and for all this budget, a green book is published when the National Defense Authorization Act is passed, cleared by the president. This book is 1,300 pages, and it is the budget increase is always bipartisan in that country. So I thought I will just mention that Army, Navy, Air Force, because they are of similar sizes, get similar budgets. You know, imagine they are getting around 165 billion each, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and another 50 billion goes to the Marines. So you know what is the quantum vis-a-vis, you know, us. The Space Force itself gets equivalent of more than half of India's budget goes just to Space Force in you know, USA. And US budget is the equivalent of next 15 countries put together. That means China, India, Russia, Saudi, all these countries put together, 15 of them, the US budget is big. So that is the quantum. And of course, for them, the competition with China, modernization with special mention, as I mentioned about the upgrade of nuclear, and you know, they have something called Pacific Defense Initiative, for which is to look at China threat. They give a huge amount over there. For them, the priority of threats is China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and the global terror. And of course, they also have given this year nearly $4 billion to for Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. So this is how the you know, the Americans are spending their out of country overseas war fighting is close to 69 billion, which is equivalent to India's entire annual budget, or to that effect, you know, it is that close. So the average military spending, you know, in the world is around 2.4% of GDP. This is the world average. So, and India is below that at 2.1. So, being a very threatened nation, I think we should go at least to the global average of 2.4% of GDP. If not, you know, a little more than that. Many in the USA think that the threat is exaggerated, and it's a narrative run by the defense industry lobby, which funds the senators and all their think tanks. So this is one view as far as the public is concerned, because they feel that there are so many other things like social security, health, border security, education, infrastructure, which should all be getting more attention than it's going towards to defense. Now, one point I want to mention before I close up, that China's defense budget, there's a large number of expenditures which are going elsewhere but are being used for defense, like the space program and many other, their cyber, etc. A large number of funds goes to the other ministries. China's total national spend on R&D is $441 billion. $441 billion national, out of which 25 billion is defense alone, which is when you look at India's, you know, India's close to $1 billion. You know, so this is one area I personally feel that we need to spend much more. On the other side, the Pakistan's official budget is only about 8.8 billion, which this year is going to 10.8, and there is what the media is telling us is it could be 12 billion for the next year. India has to find ways to increase capital budget. A lot of capital budget goes into committed loyalties. Rollover of the capital budget is now being allowed. More needs to be done on this. And my last point is that in India, my personal feeling, and I think that's true for all departments, we spend the budgets most inefficiently. First 6 months, the monies are just flowing in. In the later 6 months, there is a pressure on all somehow finished budgets in various code heads. This is most inefficient. I would rather not use it, but then use it inefficiently, because after all, it is India's money. Can we cut down revenue? Can we cut down numbers of the armed forces? Can we make them lean or mean? But India depends heavily on armed forces for internal security and HADR missions. Some child falls into well, you immediately call Indian Army. So my contention is, despite creating agencies for all them, we do more work than NDRF does, the armed forces. So don't see much changes taking place. I don't know how the numbers will reduce, but I'm sure General Shakti will tell us later on. Thank you. I thought I will just make some of these points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Air Marshal Anil Chopra. You gave a very detailed account, detailed analysis of the Indian defense budget, revenue budget, capital budget, committed liabilities, etc. Purely for want of time, I'll only comment on only one issue, that is the improvement in the infrastructure. That is roads and railways and advanced landing grounds and helipads and aircraft. And I'll just give you one example. In good old days, from Pune to go to Guwahati used to take 7 days. I repeat, 7 days, changing trains at 4 places. And recently on an emergency, I went to Guwahati and Shillong, and I reached there in 24 hours from my house in Pune to the place which I wanted to visit in Shillong. 24 hours flat, I was there. What kind of efficiency it gives to armed forces, you can just imagine. So that is one thing I thought I'll talk about. And it is improved infrastructure has also resulted into what the Defense Minister called as Vibrant Villages program. We don't have time to talk about Vibrant Villages program, but what it simply means is, having villages on the border, because today our border areas have been vacated. There's a reverse migration which is taking place from the border areas towards inside, and border villages, when they are there, traditionally these communities were eyes and ears of our security forces, And in fact, in Kargil, one would remember that one of the first warnings of the infiltration of the Pakistani armies came from Bakarwal, who were taken as animals there. But that program is also started off, and the tourism in Ladakh has improved so much. Today, there are more tourists in Ladakh than the population, and that itself ensures that a lot of money is put into the hands of the locals, thereby increasing their capacity to stay there. I'll now move on to the next speaker. The next speaker today who is with us is Shri Mukesh Butani, who is a founder and a managing partner of BMR Legal. He's an advocate and he heads a law firm also. His brief biodata talks about international tax market, transfer pricing. He has over 3 decades of experience fighting to the foreign direct investment policies, business reorganization. What I like is his expert on many landmark judgments which go to his credit, especially with regard to international tax policies, controversies, and advocacy. He is deposed as an expert witness on many contentious issues such as cross-border tax treaty, etc. He is a qualified chartered accountant and holds a bachelor's degree in commerce and laws. He was a practicing advocate before various tribunals, and he's the next part gives out his achievements. He has been consistently ranked as a leading individual, an elite practitioner, a litigation star, a band one lawyer, and a thought leader. And he has recently featured in the list of icons among India's top 100 lawyers. So really an impressive biodata, and he's more than qualified to talk on the subject that is this part of the defense industry. Now over to Shri Mukesh Butani for his presentation. Shri Mukesh.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mahajan, distinguished panelists, celebrated army personnel on the dais. It's a pleasure, privilege, and an honor for me to be present. I think the previous speakers have touched on the budget trends in terms of expenditure. I'm not going to talk about that, but my objective for the next 10 minutes or so is going to be throw in certain thoughts more as an observer and a budget analyst. I do not profess to be a defense budget expert, or for that matter, defense industry, barring some of the large Indian and multinationals I have worked in. So I'm going to touch on some of the regulatory aspects from a growth standpoint, which in my view currently could be impediments for the future of the growth of the defense industry. Well, let's try and look at the one theme of foreign direct investment. Up until 2001, there was no foreign direct investment permitted in the defense industry. So that's the first time India opened up with 26% foreign equity. Thereafter, for 13 years, no change took place. Up until 2014, the present government upped the 26% limit to 49% limit, and over and above that 49%, FDI was allowed on what is called on a case-by-case basis. The interest of foreign investors have remained low, not just up until 2014 when we upped the FDI limit, but it's largely been low. Based on the feedback that it suggests that the defense industry by its very nature likes full controlling stake, and they do not believe that 49% gives them the full controlling stake. Also, the other aspect that has been raised particularly by multinational is not so adequate protection of intellectual property. 2020 was a landmark year when we raised the limit to 74%. We have still to see the results from 2024. If you simply look at the FDI figures, they are not very encouraging. So what does that lead us to? A growing trend on Make in India, particularly in the last few years. Government's decision to ban import of 101 products in August 2020, including important products like light combat helicopters, short-range surface-to-air missile, cruise missile, are some of the important decisions. As a matter of fact, on light combat helicopters, Prime Minister himself personally took that as a first Make in India example when he talked about it. Also, some of the decisions that are viewed by investors as a reactive decision include the Defense Ministry withdrawal of tenders on short-range surface-to-air missile. Well, clearly, this was not just one isolated step. Alongside the banning of 101 items was a release of the positive indigenization list of 108 items of defense equipment, which comprises of complex systems, sensors, simulators. Now, what are the perspectives on Budget 2020 as I see it, where India stands insofar as its regulatory policy is concerned and controls on import is concerned? The long-term investment, clearly, as the earlier speakers remarked, requires humongous research and development, which means CapEx is very important. A case in point is the observation that was made by the Controller and Auditor General in terms of identifying how costly it is to manufacture indigenously licensed built platforms, particularly when you talk about fighters, light utility helicopters, even the main battle trunks. This observation is particularly important because it sheds light on the importance of capital expenditure. So, commitment to reduce imports simultaneously with a view to promote the Make in India seems to be the mantra. Opening up of the defense R&D industry, startups, and for the academia is, in my view, a very good step. 25% of the defense R&D budget has now been earmarked for R&D industry, startup, and academia, and this indeed is a laudable view. Some of the other budget announcements, particularly on infrastructure and improvement in logistics, is, in my view, going to impact the fortunes of the defense industry. For example, Parvatmala, which is the border village development, which entails the improvement in roads, railways, and logistics, undoubtedly will improve mobilization and logistics capability. Another important announcement that was made in the budget was the drone Shakti program. The finance minister specifically emphasized in her speech the importance of private industry, which would be encouraged to take up design and development of military platforms and equipments in collaboration with the DRDO. Now, the objective to attain self-reliance is laudable, but it comes with several caveats associated to it. Here are some of the recommendations that we feel will help strengthen the budget. One is the public-private partnership. The public-private partnership in the past has worked very well. If you look at some of the initiatives embarked upon by select Indian companies like Tata Power Strategic Engineering Division and L&T in association with DRDO, but we certainly need much more. Some of the other initiatives by the private sector in the PPP sector are on the advanced towed artillery gun system, wherein Kalyani Group and Tata Power are playing very, very important roles. Some of the policy considerations that we would suggest to the government include, most importantly, financing of defense sectors. What are some of the international experiences? Defense bonds are becoming very popular. EU raised it. Relook at some of the typical revenue stream, for example, a fee-based arrangement or annual grants or monthly grants or subsidies. Taxes and charges on service provision, such as construction and maintenance, could be a very important source. And it may well be shifted to a public-private partnership when it comes to looking at the revenue model. And therefore, the tax policy design assumes significance. First, in terms of integrating the public-private partnership in the existing structure. And second, providing a special regime for public partnership with a view to an advantage treatment, which currently only the defense or the defense arms get. Budget 2022 has some relevant proposals. One is the extension of the concessional 15% tax rate from March 2023 to March 2024. We believe that this should be extended for defense manufacturing. Other tax incentives would mean the weighted deduction on research and development, which will encourage Indian companies to spend more. Up until 2021, this weighted deduction was between 150 to 200%. It was brought down to 100%. The government should review this in the light of R&D that's required for the defense sector. The PLI scheme, which has been expanded only for drones, we do not see any reason why it should not be expanded for other defense manufacturing, particularly given the success that India has achieved in the automobiles and the pharmaceutical sector. GST and customs tariff are a very important source of looking at promoting the defense industry. This will include exemptions for imports of strategic and critical components for indigenously manufactured defense platforms, not just available to the defense and to the likes of DRDO, but also to the public sector undertakings and the private enterprises who are participating in the public-private partnership. The DRDO in the past has been a firewall in development of cutting-edge technology. However, DRDO's recent changes on patents and relevant intellectual publications being available to the domestic industry is free of cost, and those initiatives need to be taken forward. The other laudable initiatives are the DRDO's ability to collaborate with over 250 academic institutes in the defense area. In conclusion, the defense has had some misses as well. One of the things that the industry was expecting was announcement of a detailed, non-lapsable modernization fund for defense and internal security. This was a very important part of the recommendation that was made by the 15th Finance Commission. And we have seen this non-lapsable fund being as an avenue for funding defense budgets overseas as well. This certainly, in our view, will help bridge gap between projected budgetary requirements and allocations for the defense industry. This will also, in our view, fund essentially specific areas where incremental funding is required. Very often, funds from the consolidated funds of India are accessed. One could also look at, and this is politically sensitive, divestment or public float in select defense public sector undertakings to be able to help mobilize funds which are dedicated only for the defense industry. So I would just stop over here when the time allocated and look forward to questions, if any, that are coming if we have the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mukeshji. You covered a large ground. You spoke about foreign investment, the journey that it took over a period of time. You talked about innovations. You talked about defense R&D. You talked about PLI, productive linked incentives, etc., Gati Shakti, etc., non-lapsable defense fund, which we have been asking for many years, because every year 25-30% of the budget is surrendered simply because of the complex procedures. You simply can't use it, and it just goes away. In fact, that is one way the government एक हाथ से लेते हैं, दो हाथ से वापस ले लेते हैं. In fact, that has always been the case this year, but for the last 20 years, it helps the finance minister to show that he or she cares for the defense, but what money actually spent is much less than the money amount. Anyway, fully because of lack of time, I will not comment on other issues, but definitely what you said was very interesting. I now get to the next speaker. That is, we have a service personnel who later is called an innovator, Commander Suchit Jain. He's an innovator, entrepreneur, ex-program director of Innovations for Defense Excellence. I repeat the word, Innovation for Defense Excellence, because traditionally the defense has been very traditional in their thinking also, so you definitely require innovative solutions, because budget is not going to increase the way you want it to increase. You have to utilize the present budget properly and do some innovative things by which I suppose you can improve the quality of your defense. He's got a 25 years experience with the Navy as a commander. He's got a lot of management qualifications. His technical qualifications include M.Tech in IIT Delhi, B.Tech in naval architecture and shipbuilding. He's got more than his share of medals and commendations from the Navy. And his core competence has been startups, innovations, teamwork, consulting, market research, information technology, strategy, government advisory, communication and network. I wonder what is left out. I mean, he's a really qualified person to talk about all these issues. And I'll only touch upon, in fact, just for information, the biography of the speaker is really outstanding, and the program is being broadcast live also on YouTube. So this biography has also been put on the YouTube also, so that anybody, whatever I left out, not doing justice to the speakers who speak, also available on the YouTube. So you can have a look at there. However, I will talk about the award that is got. He won the trophy started by Amazon India. He was top 3 nominee of 267 in the CII Starterpreneurs Awards of 2018. He's been covered in Young Storycom. He's been covered in Digit Magazine. He's been covered in US Magazine. I mean, there are a lot of outstanding outstanding achievements to his credit. Now, without spending any further time, I will now request Commander Suchit Jain to talk about innovations and entrepreneurship and all other things about defense industry. Over to you, Commander Suchit Jain.
Thank you, sir, for speaking such kind words about me. I thank the organizers for inviting me on this prestigious forum, and my gratitude and regards to all the dignitaries on the dais. So it has been great hearing and learning from you all. And most of the topics have already been covered by the previous speakers. So my focus will be primarily on the innovation side, where I will be talking about the innovation, entrepreneurship, and startups in the defense sector. So this will be my primary area. To begin with, because whenever I was in the defense, I learned that you should lead with example. And I have lived all my life leading with examples. So it is not that I became an innovator after leaving the defense. I have been an innovator while within the defense itself. So I have been a naval architect from Cochin University, and when I joined the service, I was really brightly looking forward to the aircraft carrier being coming up for the Navy. And I was lucky that I got a chance to work on the design of such an aircraft carrier. And when I got a chance, I put all my efforts to see it, that we are able to design it indigenously. And I had my contributions in designing the structure of our aircraft carrier, which is called Vikrant. So I did over 1,000 analysis, structural analysis for that vessel, and I'm happy that after 20 years now the vessel is floating, and it has already completed its trials. So similarly, I was part of other design projects like P-17 Alpha, which was follow-on of the stealth frigates. So I did the complete GA modernization of the 17 Alpha, and I was also part of the nuclear submarine project, where I was looking into the planning as well as the structural aspects. So after quitting that, I thought that being a defense officer and being in the government service, so I have gained enough experience where I can contribute more to the defense while from the outside. And I did my post-graduation from Ahmedabad as well for learning how the business goes on. And when I realized that the business aspects are completely different from what I have been brought up while being in the defense, because I was, even though it was a very harsh life, but more or less from the financial side, we were never really had to really worry, because the resources which were needed to fight the war were all available. So now here, after coming out, we have to even look for the resources to develop. And then that's how my entrepreneurship journey started. So when I started, we shortly became successful there also. Within the very first year, we were the positive cash flow company, and we have been growing every year. We were doubling our revenues for the consecutive years. So I started as a consulting company, then became a services company, and now we are a products company. So during the COVID times, the times were difficult, where I had to scale down my operations substantially, and nothing was moving very positive in those times. So I thought, with my experience from the defense and from my entrepreneurship, let me contribute to the startup ecosystem in the defense area. And that's when I worked as program director with IDEX, which is the Innovations for Defense Excellence, where I got an opportunity to associate with some of the leading startups in the country. And I was quite surprised such a deep talent is already existing in the country. And if that talent is nurtured, it is supported, and we can really make big waves. And as a lot of speakers have mentioned and emphasized about the IP protection, the patents, these are very, very key critical areas for any technology to grow, because that's where the intellectual property lies, and that's where you can build, you can commercially tap it as well as take it to the markets. So in the defense area, as everyone knows, that there is a lot of government push on the Atmanirbharta, for the self-sustenance, self-indigenization. So these are the very, very important aspects and the focus areas. So I remember when I had come out somewhere in 2016, I was invited by Economic Times to a round table with the minister that time, Jayant Sinha. So Honorable Minister had asked one question. So we are launching that startups program. So how do you think that we can include startups in the government sector? So I rose up and I spoke about it. I said there are two criteria. One is the financial criteria, another one is the technical criteria. So these are the eligibility criteria which any company has to go through. And if the criteria itself says you should have prior experience of so many years and you should have done turnover of so many years, so how can a startup prove that? So this is one obstacle which needs to overcome. And then there is a financial criteria which is there. So all these are, they have to deposit the EMDs. So these are the things which startups and the MSMEs find very difficult to work on. So I think Minister noted the point, and I realized that immediately within few months there was a letter from the government which said that such a criteria for the startups has been waived off. So I see that there is lot of push by the ruling party for making the things viable for the enterprise. But we have been, living in a country which has been, 70 years. We have been into a different thought where enterprise has been looked at not very positively. Enterprise, there has been a trust deficit with the entrepreneurs. So that is what needs to be overcome, and it is being overcome slowly. But I would really want that process to hasten up, so that the policy changes that are deep level changes that are happening already in the defense area, that can really go down and give the fruits and the value that we are really looking at. So even in this budget which has come out for 2022, there have been some landmark changes that even for the capex spending has been increased to 68% from the 58% last year. So that is a huge amount. The capex budget itself is 1.5 lakh crores, and 68%, that means 1 lakh crore is available for the domestic industry. So that is a huge opportunity for our MSME, for our industry, defense industry, to tap it and take our defense manufacturing to the next level. And to top it, without the R&D, you can actually not really make innovations and make the future equipment and the platforms. So that R&D budget, including the private sector, up to 25% of the DRDO budget is an amazing step that has happened. There are many more steps. I would like the young people who are already sitting and watching this program to be aware that the government is really opened up. In earlier times, it used to take nothing less than 10 to 20 years before a product can be out. That cycle has been greatly shortened by various government programs today. IDEX has been one of the programs which not only supports, identifies such startups, it also gives them the funding up to 1.5 crores. So during my presence in this organization, I saw a lot of startups getting selected and getting benefited from this program, where the equipment development time has been shortened. Had the corona not been there, I'm sure a lot of them would have produced the equipment within 2 years, as was slated in the program. So if not 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, we are seeing many of the startups, they have already produced those equipment, and they are very good equipment. Because the startups are coming from various academic background, from their own innovations, but when the equipment has to perform for the military, it has to really perform in the harsh environments. So whether it is the battleground, whether it is the sea, whether it is the air, this is a very, very harsh environment, and its requirements are far greater than any other equipment which is there in the civilian market. So that's where the startups need nurturing, they need support, they need guidance from the stalwarts who have been there in the armed forces, and they come out and support them. So we have been doing that, and if that is done, I'm sure that a lot of startups will produce military grade equipment within the country. So these are the kind of things that we are looking at, and many other opportunities, like the government has already earmarked 500 crores for the startups from IDEX itself, and there has been a procurement of 1,000 crores earmarked from these IDEX startups only. So this is a huge benefit being given. So earlier, if you remember that in the defense industry, the industry invests a lot. They keep on investing for years, for 10 years, 20 years before they see the fruits of their results. So, but not the case anymore. Now, once a product is ready, it is ready for deployment with the armed forces, and it is being taken. So I saw many such cases when some leading technologies, some anti-drone countermeasures equipment, which is being procured by Air Force, and some live buoys being procured, robotic live buoys being procured by the Indian Navy, and the Army is going ahead and procuring many such equipment like see-through armor and many other critical equipment there, which are being produced by the startups, not the MNCs. So a huge opportunity today, I would say, has opened up for the industry, for the startups and the MSME to participate in the defense in a big way. And if we are able to create an ecosystem for them by bringing all the stakeholders together and support it, then I'm sure there is no reason why the Atmanirbharta in defense cannot be achieved. And as Chairman Ajit Ranade mentioned, that we should also focus on the exports. So export is a key area. So unless we also open up the market and take it to offshore, then they will not become sustainable. So to make them sustainable, we also have to look at the domestic market as well as the market abroad. So a lot of promotion is happening today to such technologies that can be taken abroad, and IP protection plays a key role in this. So I would urge all those innovators who are looking forward to work with defense or any other area to please protect your technology, to protect your devices through the IP protection. There are many such mechanisms available. Be aware about them. There could be a separate program about it that could be covered where this IP protection can be done. So also there are other opportunities to participate with the government, where the government has mandated 20% of their procurement from the MSMEs and the startups. And as I already mentioned, that the startups do not have to have the prior experience, or they do not have to have some amount of turnover, or they don't have to even submit the EMD. So and they can directly go to the GEM today, where they can display their product on the startup runway, and they can be procured by the concerned ministries, departments of the government and the armed forces. So this is, I think, huge. Times have really changed, and now it is for us to tap that opportunity. And I'm available for any guidance, any support which is required. And I would really urge, because now what has happened, that even the military platforms such as warships, aircrafts, the tanks, we need not depend on the foreign shores. We can do them all within our own country. There has been opinion-seeking poll by the FICCI, where I also said that it can be done within the country and we can do it. So as Brigadier Hemant mentioned, that Army has taken a step to identify such talent within the armed forces who have been working on these areas, and we can make a pool of such officers and such men who can contribute towards the development, and we can go to the government and tell them, like, look, this can be done all in-house. We need not really depend on the foreign countries for such a help. So those areas also can be done, and government has created a right platform for it. So with this, I will like to conclude my discussion on this, and I'll be open to any questions coming up.
Thank you, Commander Suchin Jain. You covered a lot of ground. You talked about innovations. You talked about Atmanirbharta. Of course, when you talk of Atmanirbharta, we also have to ensure that Atmanirbhar products are of the same class, if not higher, as compared to the ones that were imported earlier. And many a times that is not the case. Aircraft which was built up in HAL and aircraft which came directly from Russia, there was a hell of a lot of difference in absorption of technology. I don't want to get into it because Air Marshal is there, and I'm sure he can talk about it. Of course, there have been some successful examples also of Larsen and Toubro, whose technology has been of a good class, and the Navy has been happy with the submarines. The Indian Coast Guard has been happy with the kind of offshore patrol vessels that they have given. So, but I think quality has to be ensured. And you talked about startups, how the startups are coming up in a big way. And one of the examples of the startups was this beating the retreat ceremony that took place, in which 1,000 drones were flown, and this was done by the IIT, one of the IITs. And I think we are the fourth country in the world where such a large number of, let's say, drones came up and performed so many maneuvers, which we all of us saw on the screen. Purely because of we are short of time, I will now look at the question and answer session. I had requested the organizers, Vinayji, any questions? That I hardly see any questions in the chat box. There's only one comment, which is of course by Ajit Ranade. I'll just read out for the sake of everybody. He has written that U.S. defense and space spending, especially on research, has a positive impact on its economy, and some of the technologies developed by defense and space have become an integral part of their daily life. In fact, most of the industry that started off in the Western world has a background of the defense industry, started off from defense industry. The Second World War, First World War, all those innovations that came up actually started the industrial revolution in Europe. Of course, recommendation is immensely sensible. I'm the last person to comment on it. Yeah, Captain Narabane, yeah, I can see Dr. Likayat has asked a question. Okay, he just put a comment. He says the shift of theatre commands has brought in new push to the expenditure. Well, I'll put it this way. I mean, I am one person who was really sad when General Rawat passed away, because Chief of Defence Staff had an immense role in coordinating the budgetary aspects. And I only hope that the next CDS takes over fast, so that this budgeting of the three services vis-a-vis relative importance, etc., can be coordinated better. Yes, Chief of Defence Staff has a very important role to play. Theatre command is one aspect. I still wonder if Nitin Gokhale is around or not. But while talking to Nitin Gokhale, the chief, the GOC in C of the Army Training Command talked about the cyber command, which has to come in a much faster time frame because the threat is immediate. Immediate. Okay, I can see some more question from Dr. Likayat. He says, is the defense budget related to threat perception? I will leave it at that. General Malik had said in 99 war, we will fight with what we have and we will fight well. So as far as threat perception is concerned, we'll cover it up in a better manner when General Shekatkar starts talking. So I take it that we are now short of time and we are already at 11:30. So all that remains for me to do is thank all the speakers, Dr. Ajit Ranade, then Commander Suchit Jain, Admiral, my postmate is also Anil Chopra, he's a Vice Admiral, but Air Marshal Anil Chopra and Shri Mukesh Butani-M for an excellent presentation of various aspects of the defense budget. We have learned a lot from you. And now I request Lieutenant General Shekatkar for his concluding remarks. He doesn't require an introduction because he is firstly a chairman of the institution where this seminar is taking place. And secondly, General Shekatkar committee will ensure that he remains in limelight because every second day, third day, there is some mention of something happening or not happening. And as I mentioned to you right in the beginning, that government has accepted one more of this recommendation of reducing 9,000 personnel from the MES. I repeat, 9,000 personnel. A very, very positive step. I wish they work faster on the General Shekatkar committee. Over to Lieutenant General Shekatkar for your concluding remarks, sir.
Thank you so much, Brigadier Mahajan. With your permission and with the permission of the galaxy of people, Dr. Ranade, the Air Marshal, Mr. Butani, Commander Jain, and everybody. With your permission, I'll skip speaking on the allocation of defense budget for this year. That has been spoken about, has been analyzed. But I would make few comments. I know some of you may not agree with that. Like the government did not agree with the Shekatkar committee report. They say, what are you talking about? If you try and implement it and then you will see. And just now, Brigadier Mahajan mentioned, yesterday the Honorable Raksha Mantri has signed 9,400 engineers are not required in the military engineering service. And I'm sharing with you in confidence. Under my own signature, I have written there, MES, which is supposed to be engineering services. It is known as money-eating services. Money-eating services. So money is never enough for any defense anywhere in the world. There is no country in the world whose chief of the defense forces is happy with the budget allocation. There is no country in the world, I have done this entire exercise, who do not want more forces, including the United States and China. Even today, they are asking for more forces. But my philosophy is, or my recommendation is, and I am a firm believer that obesity of number does not win you the war. Obesity of numbers does not win you the war. To win the war, you have to have a slim, trim, agile, and fast-moving body of the troops. If you don't have, you can have 15 lakhs XYZ. You can go to war, but you may not win the war. So that is the first mindset which is being changed around. We have put a recommendation which has been improved that whatever was the strength of the Indian Army or armed forces, barring Navy and some technology otherwise, on 1st of January 2017, not a soldier to be increased, not one soldier to be increased. You have to do modification, you have to do readjustment within the same ceiling limit. And that is impacted. For example, the 9,700 or 400 engineers being reduced. they will be adjusted somewhere else that is required. Second one, the mention has been made, the urgent requirement of Cyber Command, Space Command, and Special Forces. These three are the elements which are going to help us to win the war, including our drone technology and so on and so forth. Earlier it was said that the war has to be fought on the sea, on the land, and in the sky. Today the war has to be fought, in future the war will be fought from the base of the ocean. The commander will know it better. From the oceanic belt to land, to the sky, and to the space. Anyone who dominates the space will dominate the world. And therefore, Space Command will have to come up with priority. Space is also connected to cyber. Cyber does not win on landlines. It is a different mechanism altogether. So these are the issues which are now drawing the attention of the government. Other thing is that we are also looking at the shape and size of some of the organizations, the DRDO, the Ordnance Factory Board, the DGQ, DirectorGeneral Quality Assurance, and so on and so forth. They are the biggest money, I will not say guzzlers, but spenders of this money. When you see the outcome which comes, the galaxy of people in the seminar, I'm asking one question to you. Do you need an ordnance factory today to make your uniforms? To make our clothes, socks, net mosquito, and so on and so forth? It's a high time. So we have looked at 14 ordnance factories which can be closed down tomorrow. And the war will not lose the war. This can be transferred. This production can be transferred to the private companies. They will do it. Another recommendation is that do not give the land, do not sell the land of the ordnance factories, but can you give the administration system of those ordnance factories, which are not in the high tech areas, to the private participants? They will run. You can give it to Dijam, you can give it to anybody who are producing clothes. You can give it to, there are a number of private peoples. Do you need an ordnance factory to prepare the spare parts for a truck or for a vehicle? We are the vehicle producers. They said, you give us the place, we'll take you anywhere you want. Anywhere we want. Similarly, I don't think in time to come that the requirement of a service known as military engineering services. And therefore, it is quite likely that by 2035, there will be nothing known as MES. Not required. If the road can be constructed in the mountainous area today without MES, why can't we do it along the border of Pakistan? Why can't we do it? It can be done. There are people doing it. The Sagarmala project is going, the Parvatmala projects are going. Is there a MES there? So far, from 2018 till December 2021, 22,000 crore rupees have been saved because of these harsh measures. And by 2025 or 2026, we will be able to save 57,000 crore without losing a war. And that is why you find this concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, Swavalambi Bharat, Saksham Bharat, Sakushal Bharat. How can you be Atmanirbhar if you continue to import your equipment from outside? And to our horror, we found that there is a well-organized, very well-structured nexus between those who are and I don't want to name some people or some organization, it will be wrong for me, who make money out of that. So this nexus has to be broken totally. And that is why you find 200 items being brought under the list of indigenization. Number of things have been changed. It is the reason. The second aspect in this is when you want to export your equipment, weapon technology, which is part of defense, the importing country or the country who want to buy would ask you, are you using this equipment in your own country? And if the answer is no, then he said, then why should I buy from you? Sir, let me tell you, even the CRPF, the Border Security Force and so on, they ask you the question, are you using this particular weapon in your own organization? If they say no, he said, that is why we are going to America. That is why they are going to other countries to buy the system. So as Mr. Butani was bringing out, I think there is a need for us to insist to use the equipment, weapon system, technology of our own country and encourage the private sector. A mention has been made about lapsable fund. There was again a nexus between the so-called financial experts. If you have got 500 crores, the 200 crores will be lapsed. They will be taken next year. So in actual fact, you will get only 300 crore, though they will call it 500 crore. And that is why we have to recommend these funds should not be lapsed. They should be carried forward, roll-on plan. Another recommendation has been there that the 2.37 to 3.2% of the GDP's budget should be allocated for defense. The reason being, the modern technology like drones, spacecrafts, a missile system are costing us more. And therefore, when you export the item, you earn the foreign exchange. And when you earn the foreign exchange, your cost of procurement goes down. That is why just last month we have signed an agreement between the Philippines to export BrahMos missile. The next on card are a number of East Asian countries. There are some strategic reasons also why we are boosting up that sector with these BrahMos missiles. Our next priority is going to be Middle East, maybe North Africa, because these are the zone of conflicts in years to come. And if Indian mechanisms start working, it makes the task easier for us. Last 2 points, I would request you to kindly consider. There is a need to indigenize the minds of the officers also, the minds of the experts. In any seminar, unless you quote Russia, unless you quote USA, unless you quote France, unless you quote a nation which does not exist on this planet, you are not taken to be an expert. Why can't we generate our own indigenization minds? So first the minds have to be indigenized. Only then, just to give you an example, before Kargil war, I was posted in the army headquarters. And during one of the discussion, the Honorable Finance Minister told my chief, he said, General, you reduce one person from the army and I'll give you so much of money. So when we came out, he asked me, Datta, I was the Major General then, and my chief, what is the strength we can reduce without affecting our combat potential? I said, sir, 1.5 lakh. Thank God he was in uniform, I was in uniform. Otherwise, he would have begged me. He would have slapped me there only in front of everybody. He said, what are you talking bloody nonsense? I have been told that you reduce one, sir. I said, easily, sir, 1.5 lakh. The study was done and we were able to reduce 50,000 people in a study of 3 months. Of course, we did not reduce. We call it suspended animation. Means you keep the strength down and when required, you take them. And then I came out of the army headquarters. I was posted out. Kargil war came. After Kargil war, we added another 1.5 lakh. Musharraf did not attack India because we reduced 50,000 people. Why I am giving you this? That we had to look into all these aspects now. Only then the defense budget will be sufficient for us. And as I mentioned, there is no commander anywhere in the world who is happy with the defense budget. There is no commander anywhere in the world who is happy with the strength. But we in India are learning. Our God bless his soul, CDS has tried our best. Our three chiefs are trying their level best. The aim is not to reduce just for sake of reducing it. No, it is not. It is to make sure that whatever allocation is being given to us, we utilize in the right time. To that extent, I must compliment and congratulate the Bhosla School and the organization for organizing this webinar. We are grateful to you all, sir, who came and spent your time. Our young generation also listening. And I request people like Dr. Ranade and their Marshal, Mr. Butani and Dr. Jain, because you are heard outside. Your views are taken. Without sounding critical, they should not say, oh, he's talking against the army. That is unfortunate truth today. The moment you speak something, they say, oh, he's against the army. Why should Dr. Ranade be against the army? Why should the Air Marshal be against the army or the armed forces? So, but when we put across the things, people will start accepting. I only hope the bureaucrats are not listening to it, because then they will get the clue. And next year, our budget will be cut furthermore. So they need to be told in that way. Not that they're bad. They know they have to survive in this very organization. They know they have to live in this very country. Everybody is not going abroad. So it will be wrong to blame the bureaucrats. Sir, having worked with these committees and committees and committees, it is not the bureaucrats. It is the bureaucracy which makes all the impact, which makes all the effect. So once again, I thank you all, grateful to you, and very kind of you. Hope to meet you sometime and listen to your views in future. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, General Shekatkar, sir. I was very happy to know these figures came out for the first time, that because of Shekatkar committee report, we have been able to reduce 22,000 crores from our revenue budget. And you have also mentioned that 57,000 crores is what is expected to be reduced by the year 2025. So the government is moving slowly, but it is definitely moving in the right direction. Let us hope that the speed increases in the days to come. And second aspect that I would talk to you would want to highlight is about this monetization of assets. You recommended that instead of selling land of the ordnance factories, it can be given to the corporate world for producing something there. In fact, today only there's an article. They said a lot of land armed forces have. Why can't you have solar parks on that land and generate solar power from there? There are a lot of innovative ideas by which I suppose your budget allotment can be increased. Purely because of lack of time, I'll stop here and I'll hand over the mic now to Shri Vinay Kulkarni.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much all the dignitaries who spoke. And it was an extremely enlightening discussion, not only for us here but also for